All right, guys. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you can hear me. If someone could just confirm in the chat if that's okay, in the YouTube chat, it would be easiest. Today I'm going to have a look through Bitcoin and ETH, have a quick look at legacy markets as well, and have a general chit chat about what's going on. As a reminder, not financial advice. Please do your own research, etc. This week has been an interesting one, obviously mainly due to, we had the CPI data, we've got the FOMC meeting today, we've got the ECB meeting tomorrow, we've got the Bank of England meeting tomorrow as well. There's a couple of other meetings going on too. So quite a lot going on, as I said last week. It's probably just all of them trying to get their meetings out of the way before Christmas. I know that's not really it, but there will be an element of that going on. And obviously today we've got the Fed's kind of commentary around what they're going to do with rates, and there'll be a slant of hawkishness or dovishness coming out of that, which will probably dictate which way the markets will go. Obviously we're expecting 50 basis point hike, but the interesting thing is going to be, to the extent to which they are, taking into account this short-term change on CPI. So CPI obviously came in slightly better than expected, both year on year and versus the previous month. My personal view, just knowing how these guys, or my experience of knowing how these guys tend to operate, is that they're probably not going to be celebrating too early. They'll be sort of saying, what we're doing is working, and we're probably not going to stray from the plan. And they'll probably say, people will probably bet that we're going to continue to hike at 50 basis points as opposed to 25, is my gut feel, because the economy is kind of doing okay as well. I don't know how the market's going to react to that. I mean, obviously, if they were really dovish about next year, then the market is more than likely going to pump on further. However, I just don't see why they would do that. Like, it doesn't seem to make sense. Like, inflation is still very high. That's just a fundamental thing across the board everywhere. And yes, there have been improvements across the board, but, things such as really bad winter. I think, I've been talking to people in the States as well. It's pretty cold over there. The effects of which probably won't be felt until next month. So we'll need to see, what happens with consumer spending as a result of, Christmas, cold months, people catching up with this cost of living thing. They might really double down on their spending in the next few months. Having said that, the main thing that we've been saying for literally months, like 6 months or more, is that we're not expecting a great escape from the bottom, if history's anything to go off, until maybe's around about day 1000, and we're currently on day 948. So give or take 50 days plus or minus. Probably it's more likely plus looking at it, but so there's still a good, probably a couple of months, in my opinion, to go, because the Fed, as I say, will want to get through the next few months, and then get through Christmas, and then the market is recovering quite well. We'll quickly have a look at legacy markets. Looking at the wrong chart here. I will go through the top 10 on Friday, by the way, so that'll be more of a lengthy live stream, but today it's just going to be the main coins. ES, NASDAQ and DXY, I'm going to just turn off Predator because I've got the combined BTC volume on. I will talk about that in a minute when we get the Bitcoin chart as well. I mean, ultimately, we have... we had a big pump out on S&P. This is the futures market. yesterday, leaving what looked like quite a nasty wick at the time. Even these Moonraker levels still work on legacy markets. And yeah, just got shorted straight down. And I think that's probably a reflection of, the market, like traders thinking that the market's overreacted to the CPI data, and then it's going to be a bit of a nothing burger today, and it's going to be sort of as expected. And overall it's good. I definitely think there are good signs around, but we still have some issues. The Russia-Ukraine conflict is just miles away. It's very difficult to understand what's going on there because of the media obviously propagandizing us, but it does seem to be implicit that Russia are up against it, and you just don't know what that response is going to be. So I still think it's, there's, as has been proven, I think, with all of the failures in crypto and all of the funds and everything that go wrong, there's no prizes for making all the money and then losing it all, and so I could be more aggressive in my approach maybe with my positioning at the minute, but I'm here for a long time and a good time, but this is a game of survival, and I don't mind playing it, just easing my way into the market somewhat. So ES up at resistance. Again, if we do a good, if we get really dovish comments today, which I think is unlikely, then yeah, we'll most likely be retesting 4150. And that could be the breakout. Maybe that is the breakout. 1, 2, 3. Is this a breakout? Maybe. If this is sustained, then it should be pretty interesting because we will have had quite a convincing bounce. However, the bear in me, I'm never really that, I don't like being a bear, but, it does happen. This could be perceived to be a bit of a rising wedge at the minute. Momentum, there is momentum divergence there. It's trying to creep back up, but overall, it's not out yet. And also the NASDAQ, I've talked about this before, the techs obviously seem to be more risky, and also it's, proxy for demand and all that advertising spend. So it's struggling a bit more. I think this is probably more indicative of what Bitcoin's more likely to do. We've seen that strong correlation previously. I do think that will return. So yeah, this one's a bit further away from breaking out. Dollar still weakening. Obviously this one will probably be quite volatile today, just drooping to the downside and coming back to that key support and resistance level we looked at last week around 103. It seems a bit rude to not test that at this point. We're nearly there, so I would expect there to be some sort of a bounce out of there. Out of 100, if we do get back to there for the index, which wouldn't be great for the other markets that we're following. So why might that happen? Well, a lot of people will have been on the other side of the trade at 100, right? So they're probably going to want to get out of it around that kind of level. So it's a big round number as well. So I would expect it to be some form of resistance. So maybe there's some headwinds in front of us that we need to get through. But we're going to go and look at Bitcoin now and try and get our heads around that, because the thing about Bitcoin is fundamentally, I'm actually going to look at the BTC USDT. The thing about Bitcoin is fundamentally, it didn't fall over. So the most bullish argument I think I've got for Bitcoin is that the lack of downside with FTX was definitely surprising. It does imply that a lot of the people who were sort of fair weather Bitcoin holders have had already left the market. A lot of them obviously couldn't leave with the FTX collapse, so maybe that's masking it a little bit. But it is what it is. Those coins can't, well, in theory, can't be sold. and they're going to be off chain. And also, I guess your argument might be, well, smart money is thinking, well, this is not impacting Bitcoin. It's impacting the exchange, obviously, but like fundamentally nothing's happened with the asset. It's kind of like a gold miner committing a fraud, but but not necessarily influencing price. They go bust. Does that change gold, like its value proposition? Well, not really. Not unless they were deemed to have specifically engaged in price manipulation, which I do think is a slight risk still, that we find out that is what happened, because part of me thinks that at the time, even at the time, I thought it's a bit of a conspiracy going on, where you can actually see in the volume. So if we just look at Terminator here, this is actually on combined volume at the minute. I will come back to that in a second. But you can see that there was a massive volume divergence really going on here in this run up, and it was mainly due to the derivatives. And I just wonder whether or not that we might find out later on that was something to do with FTX, but that's just speculation, obviously. But seems like Digital Currency Group haven't gone insolvent. We have this Binance FUD as well. People are scared to buy, so it is definitely bottomy. We have this we're a long way through the cycle. The cycle's kind of played out every single time previously, so we're definitely very close, and I thought we were bottoming before the FTX collapse, which is why, I allocated some of my holdings, not much, but, rebought some there. But overall, my sort of thesis is, well, if I sold up, 45, 50 sort of level, it doesn't really make too much difference. Can I ease my way back into the market until I feel comfortable? Yeah, I feel like that's the way to go for me personally. But obviously, short term, we need to think about, how do we do that, which is one of the things that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So just before I move on, there is a bit of a question going around, and I think it is a good, valid one, actually, and it has led to me finding something out around, using combined Bitcoin volume and not using combined Bitcoin volume on Predator. Now, the advantage of it, obviously, is that, firstly, just to explain, what it does is it looks at the spot volume traded, and kind of aggregates it and then uses that within the code, which is quite unique because, there is volume within Predator, but it's nice to be able to see some sort of consistency across exchanges. And also, as I sort of mentioned in the chat earlier, I like to look at spot volume because to me that's where money is actually entering and leaving. There's not really money coming in and leaving the derivatives market. Well, by definition there's not, it's derivative, but there is very much so when people are having net volume increasing to the buy side on spot exchange. So to me that's more important. I had started just using the BTC USD index, but haven't done a little bit of research further because this wasn't available for a while, but obviously they were getting quite a few questions, and it is now. All they're doing is they're taking Bitstamp, Coinbase, Gemini and Kraken and dividing by 4. So they are definitely missing quite a bit of the volume there. For example, when I look at the volume in the combined BTC part of Predator, it includes all the other volumes from the other currency pairs. So it's not just USD. You might find, as we have in the past, that Korea has a lot of volume going on. That's just not included. There's no euro. The euro is obviously important as well, and obviously sterling and the other currencies. So this is actually a bit limited, or more limited than I thought it was. However, the slight downside with the using the combined one, the way I do it is we have a problem where, example, FTX leaves, and then obviously what happens with the volume then, because you're missing the brought forward volume in the calculation, so it kind of skews the past a little bit. So you just have to go with what you want. Another option is you just go with the biggest exchange, which has the most amount of volume, which I don't know off the top of my head, but I presume it's like BTC USD on USDT on Binance. So there's a few options there. I'm going to stick with combined. Now, I do need to edit the code and re-release that, which I will do later on today. So don't ask me until I've done it. But I am doing that. So I will be stripping out the FTX volume, which means obviously historically it's not going to be in any of this. And it won't show the drop off in this volume. But I mean, this is the code now. And you can see that we are now turning or trying to turn green on an unclosed candle at the moment on the 3-day. We are also up against the yellow line here is the 50-day moving average, which is typically a source of resistance, or has been on the way down. Just above that, we've got the 20-week moving average coming as well. And also what is going to be an order block here, just above 18,500. So yeah, is the bottom in? Not sure, to be honest. I still think there's a little bit of time. I don't think we're just going to break like straight through 20k first time of asking. It just doesn't feel like that's what's going to happen. I think some people will just probably bail out at 20k, and it is also just a technical previous support becomes resistance level. A reclaim of 20k, however, if we start trading and find support above, let's say 18,500, we might start to build the momentum to break out of this diagonal. But then again, the 20-week moving average is there as well. So if we break out of that somehow, it's gonna be a big old push to the upside, and it will be one of those big candles. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, to be honest with you, if we break straight up to like 24, 25k. So it's good to know like where the line in the sand is, and also where you need to pay more attention. In my opinion, if you're looking to size up. And I'm going to have a look at how we've been doing that, or how to do that maybe as we get into the lower time frames. But yeah, so we're at a crossroads. Things are pretty good. We've hit this Moonraker level, supported by it. We did actually have one previously above here, which was broken obviously due to the FTX thing, but we've hit another level and it's supported. We didn't go down a lot. And that is quite surprising. We're starting to see some green. So, it's kind of saying look for buys at the moment. We'll have a look at those levels in just a tick. But before we get there, just a quick look across the market overall. Lower time frames are starting to turn over a little bit. Things were obviously really quite good yesterday. Pretty much everything was almost green. But I think this is probably reflecting people maybe risking off going into the FOMC meeting, and also just being up at some technical resistance levels for now. 3-day overall starting to turn green, but it's still indecisive. You can see across everything it's still pretty indecisive. So not quite there yet. Right, so lower time frames. Actually, before we do that, let's just look at the order book. So you can see there is quite a lot of sellers starting to stack up at Binance. I mean, fundamentally, don't get me wrong, there are a lot more buyers than there are sellers. Actually, you can see here they have started pulling the bid a little bit on Binance. That's probably due to some of this fear going around. I don't really have a view on that, other than they've got 60 billion in assets on their balance sheet, which is a lot of money. So hopefully that is enough. It really irritates me though. People seem to love the fear. They're really perpetuating it, and it just makes the situation worse. Their systems probably aren't built for completely dismantling their balance sheet overnight. Don't get me wrong, with FTX, legitimate problem. Binance, not so sure, but you could create a problem or more of a problem than really is there by all this sort of FUD stuff. So I'm not a huge fan of it. But I mean, fundamentally, there's more bids than there are asks. It's obvious on the chart. That's a Binance. Coinbase, again, very little actually above on Coinbase. Not many sellers at all. Quite a decent bid down here. I think maybe some of it's been pulled, but there's a lot more demand than supply around looking at this information alone. And also, if we have a look at I'll just open up the liquidity maps as well. Don't know why that was taking a little while there. You can see we do have a cluster of liquidations still above here. So it actually takes us nearly all the way to 19k there. So between 18 and 19k, we do have some 10x liquidations, short liquidations potentially to take out. But it really needs to get well into the 18Ks before we get there, and still relatively, we still have this big liquidity risk below where we are. I mean, ideally, perfect world for me, in my opinion, for the way I want to trade this really, and these things don't always work out, is that we go more sideways for a bit. Somewhere in this box, and maybe have a dip down. It's some sort of dip down, and then that would form the spring. I mean, the alternative argument is this is the spring, like all of this. But fundamentally, and it comes back to fundamentals for me, people are worried about putting a bid or carrying coins or funds on exchange. So while prices are low, the liquidity is going to be tricky. How do you explain to people to go and dump a load of money into Coinbase or Binance or Bitfinex at the minute, legitimately or illegitimately? So, people are going to be approaching it with a bit of a risk off, and they're going to have a bit of a jerky reaction to things. So time's a great healer, obviously, but at the moment, not 100% sure that we're going to have the follow through that we need. I think some people might just say risk off at 20k, we'll work it out after that. So there's not a great deal of supply there, but looking at this, particularly not on Coinbase, but on Binance, it does look as though people are setting up for today. If we do spike up, up towards 18.5. We know there are going to be some liquidations there, but it does smell like people really actually want to short that. And with that, what I will say is the good old Predator's high score and the long short ratio in combination, did its job again. So yesterday, or while we were consolidating, you can see long short ratio comes down, continually going down as we consolidate and start squeezing up, kept coming down, went below 1 eventually. Even if you waited until 17.4 or whatever, it went below 1, and then we got that final push up. And at the same time, if we look at Commando, we've started to 1.78 or 1.8. Anything above that's normally quite good. We got in around 17,200, let's call it. And even if you waited for the 2, that came at 17,200 again. But you can see that progression to the upside, and then we eventually popped off up to 19k. So Predator doing its thing for Bitcoin. There you can see that we are starting to see those Commando, not Predator, but you can see the Commando scales are starting to drift off, and we are currently at 1.83. So, what's happening with long short ratio at the minute. It's trending up, and that's okay as well. It's only when there's divergence that there's really a problem. So as long as it's going in line with price, that's sort of all right. It's just when you see this sort of thing here. So you saw consolidation. People did start long on it. There was a bit of a divergence there, but then when it broke down, immediately everyone tries long it. Yeah. And when that happens, it's kind of better to just wait and see, and then wait until, you start to see everyone else starting to push the wrong way and getting out of their position. So basically everyone here just provided liquidity to those guys who went long. And yeah, that's just kind of the way, unfortunately, it works, that most people do tend to ultimately be wrong. So, in reality, what happened is all the guys who started to go long here and long through this dip, basically they were all sort of out before the pump to the upside. So it's just kind of like poetry in motion for people losing money, unfortunately. Not necessarily losing; they might have all got out at break even, but they weren't on the pump. That's for sure. So anyway, but again, without looking at those other two charts, you could have just done the same thing with the other things that we look at, which is I'll just get rid of a few of these things. Looking at Bitcoin, 1 hour, I mean, it's not always right. Nothing's ever going to always be right. There will be fake outs like here, but fundamentally, if we're getting increasing highs on Terminator, and also with regards to momentum, I do need to release this indicator, but TradingView didn't like it when I did it the first time, so I've asked them what the issue is. But anyway, hopefully that'll get sorted soon. I might need to build in some more fancy stuff or something. But yeah, increasing momentum, increasing volume, green on Predator, both examples we had long short ratio coming down. The 1 hour is where it is at the moment, and it has been for some time. As I say, not always going to be 100% accurate. But here, even if you longed this, you'd have been looking to get out on the next candle. So very, very small amount of risk. Again, over here, I mean, it wasn't that convincing, was it, at this point? Look at the volume, it was really low. We hadn't actually flipped to the upside on the momentum. Volume was okay, actually. But yeah, again, over here, maybe you long that, and it didn't work out, but you get out pretty quickly thereafter. So keep the losses small, let the winners run, and the winner did run indeed. So the way to trade this, I would have suggested, is let it go until after a big pump. It is pretty good to get your stops, like just to get out on the first candle when there's a bit of bother. You can always get back in again. For example, you'd have got out here. You could, if you wanted to, have got back in pretty much the same price, and then you could be coming out now. So I think, overall volume looks like this at the minute. It's a bit lackluster. Momentum, not ideal. Terminator, volume not great. So, and we know that we've got those asks above. We also know there's that liquidity above. So wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of test up here and then rejection, and we'll come back down. Like that's the most likely scenario, in my opinion, all things considered, short term. But this is on the 4 hour, it is just grinding up for now. We have respected this channel that we're in at the moment. It does seem quite important. And the question is really, the vibe to me feels like when we were over here, where we kind of had this base over here, and we were kind of trading against it for a while, broke out, and then started trying to complete, some sort of further upside move. This was basically like a rising wedge with decreasing volume, if I remember. Can't really see it on the 4 hour, but it was. Just take my word for it. And here again, we kind of have this sort of base case here, which was sort of broken out of, and we're kind of grinding up a bit. And yeah, it like maybe we get a bit more of a push to the upside. But I would be surprised if we continue. I don't mind being surprised, but we are in that situation at the minute where it's like the best example is Predators like just about changing. And when that sort of thing happens, if you really want to be in, I think trading the lower time frames is probably a good way in, because you limit your risk in case it's wrong, or your bias is wrong. But you're still in to some extent, or you're working your way in. It's just not 100% clear. We haven't got a really clear weekly and 3-day trend with a good macro background. It's just not there. So yeah, I think there's no harm in being cautious. As I say, that would outperform 3 Hours Capital and Alameda as well, who were meant to be the mega brains. But anyways, so yeah, Bitcoin for now, as I say, 1 hour, that's where it's at for me. And it's a very simple system, and it works time after time, every time. Well, not every time, but most of the time. When we're going to have this move to the upside, if you find those confluences, it's going to take you to where you need to be. It's just a question of, do you have the discipline of staying in and getting out at the right times? So anyways, yeah, at the minute, the market's kind of in this holding pattern. Normally, as I say, like the longer this goes on, this consolidates, the weaker it's going to be, in my opinion. But as I say, quite often we see these end up with some sort of push up and rejection, and the fact that we have this liquidity is quite convenient for those people who are asking or offering their bitcoins up at that price, slightly above us. So don't be surprised if we have that sort of movement. Obviously, depends what's said later. Again, we'll just quickly have a look at ETH. Very similar situation. Long short ratio on ETH went even lower, I think. Oh no, not quite. It was basically the exact same as Bitcoin. We had decent Predator score coming in, which means pay attention at 1,300-ish, and then we rallied up. Still pretty good score for now, but you can see it's sort of starting to show a bit of a sign of pulling back there somewhat. And yeah, let's have a look at the ETH chart. So yes, that's the 1 hour, isn't it? Let's zoom out a little bit. So as a reminder, ETH's also up against this diagonal resistance. Diagonal resistance. The big white line here is the 200-week moving average. So obviously that's quite important. You see it acted as support here and rallied off it pretty big time here. Again, pretty big bounce. So above that we have the 200-day, and above and with that the 20-week moving average. So it's kind of really close to resistance and this diagonal here, and also we'll have this resistance level on Moonraker as well, around sort of 1500. So I could see us maybe trying to break above it, and then maybe coming back and retesting the 200-week moving average. Clearly holding the 200-week moving average will be critical. And maybe again 1 hour time frames will be important. I have just realized I have combined BTC on, which is the problem with having to remember to take that off. It doesn't apply on other charts, but broadly the Bitcoin volume is probably representative of the other volumes generally anyway, so it's not total disaster. So yeah, 3-day is green again, so promising is what I would say. Support around 1200. We have talked as well, like on ETH, they do have the liquidations basically just below 1,000. So that's Ethereum's view of it. It's not at risk at the moment, sort of, but just as we're coming down to 1,000 would be a bit of a problem, which is below these lows. So if Bitcoin reverses, well, we're pretty close to those lows at this point, like to the bottom, to this resistance rather here. So I would expect Ethereum would probably come down and test those if this does turn out to be some sort of like wedge to the upside. Anyway, short term, we have got it off now. Short term looks quite good. So it's not full green on Predator, but it's not a million miles away, is it? I'll just change this as well. Volume, not fantastic actually. So there is some divergence there. It hasn't rolled over yet, but there is some divergence, and price momentum isn't quite there. But would it be bad to be long? No, I don't think it would. Across time frames, you can see it's pretty much green on everything nearly. But as I say, I would expect this to be similar to Bitcoin, so we'd probably see a big old pump and then dump, depending how the wording goes today. Do I think there's anything wrong with being long at this point? No, but I would probably drag like these stops with me as we would move to the upside. Where's the VWAP? I presume we're above that. Yeah, so broken the VWAP, supported by the VWAP. That tends to be the number one sort of confirmation for me that we will move to the upside. A good example would be Bitcoin actually. If we just go back down to here on Monday morning, sort of Bitcoin had that. This is when the Binance FUD came, and then we bounced up and maintained the VWAP, and then it continued to the upside. We are bouncing off the VWAP here, so I think people are sort of betting on this 50 basis points here, but it's, to me, that's not news, because that is what this pump represents already. So yeah, I don't know. I'm skeptical whether or not, I mean, don't get me wrong, if they say it's over, no more rate hikes, then I'd expect us to continue quite aggressively. But I do think overall, Bitcoin's probably going to be the main beneficiary, Bitcoin and ETH, of all of these problems that we're seeing. I mean, Ethereum here, you can see it's got. Oh no, this is Bitcoin. Sorry, we still have resistance, like where we are now. So you can sort of see resistance, break through that liquidity. It feels like that's going to be tricky to do, but it looks all right for now. We haven't quite turned green yet, so worth keeping an eye on. We're trying to get there though. I'm having to flip between this. You can see why when I'm talking to you guys, it's easier for me to use the index, but realistically, it's better to use combined. So I'll just check that hasn't actually changed while I've been talking. No, I think we're still red for now. So yeah, picture's quite good. Expecting a squeeze, which will probably not continue, unless it's really dovish. That's my outlook. Do I think we'll get through all of this and we'll go up beyond 19k? Highly unlikely. So I would imagine that joining the shorters here or sellers wouldn't be a disaster of an idea. But in terms of where's a good idea, or what, not where's a good idea, but where might be a good place to consider a bid, along this diagonal. I always worry about bidding on diagonals. It's not been the most consistent thing, I would say, over the years. Horizontal support and resistance is generally technically better. I would suggest around about 17,300 would be where we need to maintain overall. So that around those sorts of levels for Bitcoin. And I mean, one other thing worth mentioning is when we do go green on the 3-day, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to, pile straight in. It just, like, a good example again would be over here. We went green. Okay, let's assume it wasn't this candle and it was this one, so it did actually get us in earlier, but let's assume we longed this candle over here on July the 22nd. Overall, it's kind of saying look for an entry. It doesn't say jump in and sort of forget about it for now. You can finesse your entry, which, as I say, the best way in my view to do that is using the 1 hour at the moment and being quite ruthless with your risk management. And then once the situation progresses, you need to do less management on the lower time frames, and you can kind of sit back. Okay, so that's it for today. I am going to go through the top 10 on Friday with Phil. So I think what we're going to do is go through these 10 and then rank them in terms of how good they look. Hopefully we'll keep an eye on that. I think this is probably something we should do quite regularly, is keep the top 10. It's quite tricky. There's obviously a lot of coins, but I think the top 10s are probably where we need to focus our attention, at least in the short term. Let's see what comes out of these FOMC minutes. Be good if people have stuff to share, then get it shared in the Bitcoin trading channel. So otherwise just let me know if you've got any questions. I'll release an update of the Predator script later on today, and then hopefully I'll be able to get this momentum oscillator sorted out as well. But otherwise just let me know if you've got any questions, and I shall speak to you later.